So, can you put the following numbers in order from least to greatest and explain your thinking as you go?
So I put 34s over 100 because I know that 34% it would be out of 100, so I'll put it under 100. Then for 0/15,
Why did you decide to make it a fraction?
Because this is a fraction, and it makes it easier for me to understand it.
And why did you decide to make them all fractions instead of either decimals or percents?
Because it's easier to make them into the percentages to the fraction things.
So it's easier to compare. You're saying it's easier to put fractions into percents and decimals into fractions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I know this one is in the 100th place, so I'd put 15 over 100. Then I have 2/3, so I would sort them to least from greatest.
How can you compare 2/3 if the denominator is not 100 like the other two fractions have?
Like, what do you mean?
Well, you're going to put them in order from least to greatest, right? So I guess how would you know which one is the least?
I make the same denominator, or
Well, if you did that, would it help you compare your fractions?
probably.
So how would you make them have the same denominator?
Couldn't you put it to 10?
Which fraction to 10?
Like the denominators?
Can you make them all 10? Do they all have a common denominator of 10?
Yeah. Well, 3 only goes into 9.
So 3 only goes into 9. Can you make any of the other denominators be 9?
No.
Is there another way then that might be more helpful for you in order to compare them from least to greatest?
Couldn't I multiply? Like,
So you originally said that it was easiest to compare these from least to greatest by putting them in fraction form, but then we came to a stopping point because that one doesn't have the same denominator, right? So is there another way you can do this to compare those three numbers?
turn into decimals?
So turn into decimals. Could you make them all decimals?
Yeah. So you could do, what would I do with 2/3?
Well, what did we do yesterday in class?
I was in here.
So if you have the fraction 2/3, what do you think you could do to make it a decimal?
Multiply? Like, divide?
And why do you think divide?
Because to make it like easier for the smaller number to put into like hundreds or something.
What else about fractions do you know that would maybe signal to divide to you? What else do you know about like a fraction that would signal to divide to you?
Because this means division.
Okay. So then 2 divided by 3, if you do your 2 divided by 3, what would you come up with?
When you become a negative number, right?
Why negative?
Because you're dividing 2 by 3, not like a bigger number before.
Could you maybe write it out as a division problem and see what you would come up with?
Is this right?
So remember, it's saying 2 divided by 3.
So 3.
So you did the top number and the bottom number out. And then how would you go about that?
Do you just divide like 3 into 2?
Well, can 3 go into 2?
No.
No. So do you remember what you had to do at the beginning of the school when we were learning with dividing decimals?
Add decimal.
Add a decimal. What else do you have to add?
Decimal to the outside. Annex a 0.
Annex a 0.
It's right there.
So if you annex a 0, so if you have 3 divided by 20 now, how many times can 3 go into 20 without going over?
Six times.
So then what would you do there?
2.
So if you're left with a remainder of 2, do you think you're done or do you think you need to keep going?
Keep going.
Keep going.
Wouldn't it still be the same though?
So try it. What happens?
It becomes a 6 again, right? Left over with 2.
So what do you think this decimal, or the fraction 2 divided by 3, what do you think that decimal would actually be? You notice that there's a pattern here, right? So do you think that this 0.66 would ever end, or do you think it would just keep going 0.666666?
That will keep going.
So you notice the repeating pattern. So if you had to write 2/3 as a decimal, what would you have as your your decimal?
Yes.
So then if you had to compare them from least to greatest, how would you put them? In what order?
Wouldn't 66 be least or?
Well,
Because
how
nine
do
is
you...
0.
You have least to greatest, right? So you have 0.15 and then 0.34. How did you know that 0.34 was greater than 0.15?
Because this one, they're both in the hundreds, but this 34 is greater than 15.
So then how can you add 0.66 to that? Would it be in the middle? Would it be less than all of them? Or would it be greater than all of them?
Less than?
Why less than?
Because it's not in the 100 place.
What's not in the hundredths place?
This is in the tens, right here.
So you're comparing 6/10 to 15/100 and 34/100?
Yeah.
What fraction do you, or what decimal do you actually have written there, though, for this one? How would you actually read this with what you have written?
66.
66 what?
100.
100. So if it's 66/100,
That would be greater.
so then you have 0.15, 0 and 34/100, and then 66/100. So you were comparing by place values, it sounded like, right? So you're saying the way you read them is telling me I know which order it goes in? Is that kind of how you figured that out?
Yeah.
Okay.